Beautiful Anonymous changes each week. It defies genres and expectations. For example, our most recent episode, I talked to a woman who survived a murder attempt by her own son. But just the week before that, we just talked the whole time about Star Trek. We've had other recent episodes about sexting in languages that are not your first language, or what it's like to get weight loss surgery. It's unpredictable, it's real, it's honest, it's raw. Get Beautiful Anonymous wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey listeners, this is Peter, and welcome back to the History Shorts podcast. This humble show is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, yours truly included, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. Imagine it's the 2nd century AD, the height of the Roman Empire. From Britain to Egypt, from Spain to the Euphrates, one man stands at the pinnacle of the ancient world. But he is not a conqueror in the usual sense. He's actually a philosopher, a thinker in armor, you might say, a man who wrote not for glory, but for guidance. This is the story of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor whose life, teachings, and death still echo through the centuries.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941,
it's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Marcus Aurelius was born on April 26, 1921 AD, into a noble Roman family with ties to the imperial court. From a young age, he was marked for greatness. Intelligent, serious, and disciplined, the Emperor Hadrian, known for his sharp eye for talent, took notice of the boy and arranged for him to be educated among Rome's finest tutors. But unlike most aristocratic youths who pursued wealth and pleasure, Marcus was drawn to philosophy, particularly Stoicism, a school of thought that taught self-control, virtue, and acceptance of fate. He studied under the Stoic teacher Junius Rusticus, who introduced him to the writings of Epictetus, a former slave turned philosopher. The lessons of Stoicism became the foundation of Marcus's character, and later his entire empire. To the young Marcus, philosophy wasn't abstract. It was a way of life, a shield against corruption, power, and despair. He would need all three before his life was done. In 138 AD, the Emperor Hadrian, childless and aging, adopted a trusted senator named Antoninus Pius as his heir. But Antoninus agreed to take the throne on one condition, that he in turn adopt Marcus Aurelius as his son and successor. Marcus was 17 at the time, and overnight he became the heir to the greatest empire on earth. Antoninus Pius ruled for nearly 23 years, and his reign was peaceful, stable, and prosperous. Marcus grew up watching him, observing how power could be wielded not through conquest, but through restraint and justice. When Antoninus died in 161 AD, Marcus ascended to the throne. But he did something remarkable. He shared his power. He insisted that his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, be made co-emperor. It was the first time in Roman history that the empire had two rulers at once. It was also the first sign of Marcus's humility. He did not see the throne as a prize, but as a duty, a burden placed upon him by fate. If Marcus Aurelius expected a peaceful reign, fate had other plans. Almost immediately, disaster struck. War erupted in the east against Parthia, Rome's longtime rival. Lucius Verus led the campaign while Marcus remained in Rome to govern. But victory brought no peace. The returning soldiers carried with them the deadly plague, kind of like smallpox, which spread across the entire empire, killing millions. Then came invasions along the northern frontier, as Germanic tribes pressed against the fringes of the empire. For much of the next decade, Marcus spent his life on campaign, sleeping in tents, eating with soldiers, and commanding from the field. He was not a natural warrior, but he was definitely a determined one. He believed it was his duty, the Stoic duty, to face hardship with courage and composure. As he wrote in his private reflections, "Do not pray for an easy life. Pray to be the kind of man who can endure a difficult one." Amid the chaos of war, Marcus Aurelius began writing a series of notes to himself. Think of them as reminders, reflections, and moral exercises. He never meant for them to be published. They were actually quite private, a dialogue between the emperor and his own soul. These writings would later be known as Meditations, one of the most profound philosophical works ever produced. In them, Marcus wrestles with questions that are as timeless as they are human. How do we act justly when the world seems unjust? How do we endure loss, sickness, and death? How do we rule others when we cannot always rule ourselves? His answers were quiet, humble, and deeply stoic. He reminded himself that anger and pride were enemies, that life was short and fate indifferent, that virtue, not pleasure, was the only good worth pursuing. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Or, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Or even, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. These were not commands to others. This was just him speaking to himself. To read the Meditations is to watch a man struggle to remain human while burdened with divine authority. Marcus Aurelius ruled during one of the most difficult periods in Roman history. The economy faltered under the weight of war and plague. The legions were stretched thin, political intrigue simmered in the Senate, and at home, tragedy haunted him. He and his wife had at least 13 children, but most of them died young. Only one son, actually, Commodus, survived to adulthood. Marcus loved him deeply, but worried about his character. Even in the Meditations, there is an unspoken melancholy, a sense that the next generation may not uphold the same ideals. And, well, history showed us that he was right to worry. But that part of the story would come much later. For now, Marcus carried on, campaigning along the northern frontier, writing by lamplight in his tent, leading by example. Soldiers admired him for his discipline and simplicity. He dressed plainly, ate little, and refused luxuries even in the depths of winter. He believed that an emperor must serve and not be served. When an aide once complained about the hardships of war, Marcus replied, "What is evil to you does not exist for the rest of nature, so why should it for you?" To Marcus, Stoicism wasn't a theory, it was a way of life. It taught that the world is governed by reason, and that our only true possession is our response to what happens. He viewed life as kind of a test, not to be passed or failed, but to be endured with dignity. He wrote often about mortality, reminding himself that emperors and peasants alike end the same way. Soon you will have forgotten all things. Soon all things will have forgotten you. Yet rather than despair, he found liberation in that thought. If life is fleeting, then each act of kindness, each moment of virtue became infinitely precious. He urged himself to live each day as though it was his last, not recklessly, but gracefully. Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now, take what's left and live it properly. For Marcus Aurelius, philosophy was armor, not to escape life, but to engage it fully, with reason and compassion. By the late 170s, after decades of war and exhaustion, Marcus's health began to fail. He had spent nearly half of his reign on campaign, and the plague continued to devastate his empire. In 180 AD, while stationed in Vindobona, modern-day Vienna, he fell gravely ill. As death approached, he called for his son Commodus, urging him to continue his work and rule justly. But Commodus, impatient for power, left his father's bedside to prepare his succession. Marcus reportedly faced death as he had faced life, calmly, without fear. His final words were simple: "Go to the rising sun. I am already setting." He died on March 17th, 180 AD, at the age of 58. The soldiers who had fought beside him wept openly. Across the empire, his death was mourned as the passing of Rome's last true philosopher-king. With him ended the era historians would later call the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. His son Commodus would soon drag the entire empire into corruption and decline, ushering in an age of instability that Marcus had spent his entire life trying to prevent. For nearly 2,000 years, the figure of Marcus Aurelius has stood as a paradox. A man of absolute power who sought only moral clarity, a ruler of the known world who believed that true greatness lay within. His book, The Meditations, has survived wars, plagues, and empires. It has guided generals, presidents, philosophers, and ordinary readers alike. Napoleon actually carried it in his campaign satchel. Thomas Jefferson had a copy of it in his library. Modern leaders, from Bill Clinton to military officers, have cited it as a manual for discipline and humility, because, well, its message transcends its age. Marcus did not write for Romans. He wrote for human beings, flawed, anxious, and searching for meaning in a world of chaos. When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to love, to act. These words, written in a tent 2 millennia ago, still resonate today. In time of corruption and cruelty, Marcus Aurelius reminded the world that power and virtue could coexist, if only for a while. His life wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, he failed to stop his son's descendants, he waged long wars that cost countless lives. But through it all, he never lost sight of philosophy, the belief that character, not circumstance, defines us. He once wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." It's hard not to imagine him, sitting alone by the flicker of a campfire, writing these very words while snow fell quietly on his tent. A man surrounded by soldiers, yet utterly alone with his thoughts. And in those thoughts, he left behind a map, not to empire, but to a peace of mind. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that leadership is not about dominance, but about discipline. He ruled not through fear, but through example. He understood that life's hardships, illness, betrayal, even death, cannot be controlled, but our response to them can. He accepted fate without bitterness, power without arrogance, and death without fear. In a world driven by ego and ambition, his words still offer a kind of quiet resistance, a philosophy of humility in the face of chaos. To read the Meditations today is to hear a calm voice across centuries, whispering, "Be patient, be honest, be kind. You cannot control the world, but you can control yourself." And that, he believed, was enough. Hopefully today's episode has inspired you to seek out and learn more about this subject. For answers to questions, sources for today's episode, to leave a comment, or check out upcoming guest announcements, visit www.historyshortspodcast.com or look for History Shorts Podcast on Facebook and X. Stay curious, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.